Line moving just a tad. I'm getting chills just thinking about that cold weather that they're going to be facing in those temperatures. And I'm joined by two guys who know all about playing in the cold. Former Giants quarterback Danny Kanell here in the studio with me, and former St. Louis, Buffalo, and Washington linebacker London Fletcher, the Super Bowl champions and a four-time Pro Bowler, is the newest member of the HQ family. London, welcome to the team.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for. I'm excited to be joining the HQ family.
Okay, let's start with the Super Wildcard opener between the Raiders and the Bengals. Which team's playoff appearance is more impressive for you, London?
Without a doubt, it's the Las Vegas Raiders. When you think about all the things they overcame on the field and off the field, their head coach, John Gruden, was fired 5 games into the season. Henry Ruggs, their starting wide receiver, was involved in a fatal car accident that killed a young lady and her dog. And then at one point during this season, the Raiders, they're sitting at 6-7 in the midst of a 2-game losing streak. They had just lost a road game to the Kansas City Chiefs, 48-9. And what did they go on to do? They went on a 4-game winning streak, winning games on the road at Cleveland and also at Indianapolis. And then, going against 2 teams on the road who were still fighting for their playoff lives. And then the final game, Sunday Night Football, we saw that game against the Los Angeles Chargers, win and get in. What Rich Bisaccia, the interim head coach, was able to do to get his team in line and believing that they were able to, that they would be able to make the playoffs was extremely impressive. That's why I think they are the most impressive playoff team this year.
So, London, I actually looked up the preseason expectations to see what we thought these teams were going to be, and they're very similar. The Raiders' preseason win total was set at 7. The Bengals was at 6.5. So statistically, what the Bengals have done is more impressive. They exceeded expectations more than what the Raiders did. But I am in total agreement with you. What the Raiders had to deal with, every NFL coach that you talk to, they despise distractions. And yet this whole entire season has been distraction after distraction after distraction. And the biggest distraction of all is losing your head coach. And with some of the stuff that was said about John Gruden, that could easily tear apart a locker room. Guys maybe have allegiance to him, maybe some don't. And then the racial undertones that were in those emails, it could have been an absolute disaster. The fact that this team was able to hold things together and deal with the adversity that London just talked about in the middle of the season and finish out strong, to me, it's more impressive. The Bengals, by the way, too, they're a trendy pick for the future. They got Joe Burrow. I know he came off a horrific injury to come back and have an impressive year, but this future is bright for them. Derek Carr, every year, it's what does the future hold for him? Is he going to be back? To me, it's the Raiders, and I'm with London. I don't think it's even close.
You mentioned Joe Burrow. Let's talk about the quarterback situation here between these two teams. Burrow in his second year making his playoff debut. Derek Carr making his playoff debut in year 8. Might be some nerves for both players here. Danny, Burrow's coming off a national championship. That experience not too far removed from that, just a couple of seasons removed from that. But when you look at both of these quarterbacks, who do you think is better equipped to handle the pressure of the situation today?
So I think Joe Burrow is. This is a player who, even going back to LSU, I watched him a ton covering the college game. He just has a knack for rising to the level of the stage. The bigger the stage, the more he thrives. He is one of the coolest cats under pressure and just kind of wants it on him. And Derek Carr has even self-admitted, figuratively and literally, because he struggles under pressure when there's pressure on him and he's getting hit a lot. But he also, I think he struggles on the bigger stages. So if you ask Jeremy, who's better equipped for this stage, I think it's Joe Burrow. And Derek Carr, I think, is one of the more underrated, underappreciated quarterbacks in the league. But to me, Joe Burrow is ready to shine and ready to really step into being a superstar in this league.
Well, I agree that Joe Burrow is extremely cool, and what he's been able to do with this Bengals team in only his second year, very poised. However, I'm going to go with Derek Carr as being more poised and being ready to perform under this stage. When you think about the Raiders, I mentioned that 4-game winning streak that they were able to go on. For them, they've been in the playoffs in a playoff type scenario or atmosphere the last 4 weeks, and Derek Carr has risen to the occasion. Week in and week out, he continues to perform at a high level. You mentioned, teams, think he's constantly counted out. Is Derek Carr going to be replaced by the Raiders? He doesn't flinch. He doesn't listen to the outside noise. What he's been able to do with this Raiders team, again, I mentioned, he was able to take the Raiders on the road, win a game in Cleveland in a very difficult place to play. Then took his team into Indianapolis and which most people thought they were going to lose that ball game. They were able to win that game 23-20. And then at the end of the season, everything's on the line. They're facing Justin Herbert and the Chargers. What does Derek Carr go out and do? He goes out there and gets it done. He's poised. He's been in these scenarios the last 4 weeks. That's why I think he'll perform well, and the stage won't be too big for him.
That's a great point in the fact that they have been playing basically playoff football for the last month. But when you look at his record in freezing temperatures, I mean, they're going to Cincinnati. It's going to be cold. We're not talking about Buffalo cold, but still the weather is going to be a factor in that game. He's 0-5 in games with freezing temperatures, Danny. How much of a concern is that? And do you think maybe that puts a little bit of a chip on Derek Carr's shoulder?
Derek Carr should have a chip on his shoulder. I mean, we talk about the criticism that he's faced, and you hear about these numbers, but it does become a real thing. It becomes mental. There's also the aspect of somebody, who grew up in South Florida. This is where I grew up. It's warm, much like it is in Las Vegas. And it's one thing if you live in the cold and you're from a place that's warm weather, you can get accustomed to it. Your blood gets used to it. You kind of get acclimated to it. But when you travel into it, it is a shock to the system, and it's a shock to your body. And that, to me, I think is a very real issue for Derek Carr and the Raiders. But one of the things that's very interesting about this four-game stretch that they went on to get to this point, the 4-0 stretch, was their commitment to the run game. So I feel like as much as we're talking about Derek Carr and his ability to throw and the cold weather temperatures, what this Raiders team has been doing down the stretch might have prepared them perfectly to be in a road environment where it is going to be cold, where they don't have to rely on Derek Carr.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The way the Raiders have been able to run the football against teams down the stretch, Josh Jacobs, we saw what he was able to do against the Chargers last ball game. One thing that I love about this Raiders offense and Derek Carr in particular is he's going to have Darren Waller back. This will be his second game back. Now, I know they didn't really have a great game last week, only connecting on two receptions out of 9 targets. However, Darren Waller, he had missed a ton of games due to injuries. He's going to be his go-to guy. And the Cincinnati Bengals, they struggle covering tight ends. We saw Kittle have a big game against them. We saw Travis Kelce have a big game against them. He's going to be his friend. And I don't think the weather will be an issue for him. As I mentioned, they just played a game in Kansas City not too long ago. They just played a game in Cleveland. I'm from Cleveland, and I can tell you, it's freezing in Cleveland come November. So he's accustomed to playing in cold weather this season, especially down the stretch.
You guys both commented on the fact that the Raiders have committed to the run game down the stretch. Josh Jacobs over 20 carries in each of the last few games. So the Bengals pass attack, we know it's well established with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, and they can also run with Joe Mixon. When you look at both of these teams, what is the top matchup that you're keeping an eye on, London?
You mentioned the run game, and you just mentioned Joe Mixon. The Joe Mixon versus Denzel Perryman, the inside linebacker for the Las Vegas Raiders, the Pro Bowl linebacker for the Las Vegas Raiders. In that ball game, the first time these two teams met, the Raiders, they actually did a great job against against Joe Burrow. He only threw for 148 yards. The difference in that ball game and how Cincinnati was able to go into Las Vegas and win that game was the running of Joe Mixon. He rushed for 123 yards and 2 touchdowns, but it was really the second half performance of Mixon in that game. He had 83 of his 123 yards in the second half of that ball game and also had a touchdown. He's the key to the Bengals offense, because if they can run the football effectively, they're not going to be in third and long situations. And it also opens up the play action pass, which will allow Burrow to take advantage of one-on-one matchups, whether it's with T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, or Tyler Boyd.
I love it because, London, we have similar kind of matchups. I look at the flip side because I think both of us are kind of alluding to what we think is going to be a physical ball game. And I went with the Raiders' defensive line as a unit against the Bengals' offensive line. And it's in both facets of the game. They're going to have to protect Joe Burrow in the pass game. And this team has not been great. They're 5th worst protecting the quarterback according to Pro Football Focus. And they've got to be able to run the football. Now, what's unique to me about the Raiders' defensive front is they have the lowest blitz percentage in the NFL, and yet the defensive line specifically has the highest pressure rate, which means they don't have to bring 5, 6, and 7 guys to get home to the quarterback. With these two beasts up front, Max Crosby and Yannick Ngakoue, they're able to come off the edge, screaming at Joe Burrow, making him uncomfortable, making him step up, and if they get that push up the middle, man, if that puts him off his spot, it allows the defense in the back end to do their job as well. And also when you rush 4 up front with the other 7, I know they do a lot of cover 3 predominantly, but they can tweak things a little bit more, and they have extra guys out there stopping the pass as well. So that to me is going to be a critical matchup. The Raiders defensive line versus the Bengals offensive line is one of those ones to watch for in the trenches.
Time now for winning ingredients delivered by Papa John's. Let's end with a pick here. Danny, I'll start with you. Bengals fighting, of course, that 30-year playoff winning drought. They are the home favorites. Are you riding with the Cats?
I think they win, but I like the Raiders here with the points. I think it's too big of a point total, or a favorite here for me. And we've talked a lot about the different matchups in the game. I also like the under because I think both teams realize the first time around, as much as Joe Burrow's been throwing for 500 yards and 400 yards, and he's been awesome, I think they look back at the first matchup, the success they were able to have. The Bengals were running Joe Mixon, kind of taking that ball in ball control. And then we also talk about the 4-0 stretch that the Raiders had to finish the season, what they did with Josh Jacobs. I think this will be a little bit more of a low-scoring game, and I think it'll be a field goal game. So if that spread is over a field goal, I like the Raiders here with the points, and I also like the under in a low-scoring affair.
So, Danny, I like the Bengals in this game as well, but I'm going to take the under for the score, but the over as far as the points go. I like the Bengals winning by at least a touchdown. One thing that I looked at, the Raiders kind of got a raw deal when you think about the schedule. They played last Sunday night at home, an emotional game to get into the playoffs, and then they come back and have to play on a short week, so to speak, traveling across the country, playing today, this afternoon. I was in a similar situation with Washington, where we played a game Sunday afternoon to get into the playoffs. Then we had to fly all the way across the country, play the Seattle Seahawks on a Saturday in the first round of the playoffs. We kind of ran out of gas in that ball game. I think that'll affect the Raiders in this game. I think emotionally, they've just put so much into the season, so much to get into the playoffs, and I think it'll be eventually too much for them to overcome in this game. I see it being a lower scoring game. However, the Bengals win by at least a touchdown.
And when you take a look at the percentage of money bet on the spread, 60% going towards the Bengals to cover at 5.5. That line has increased to 6. They're now favored by 6 points. 40% of the money going to Vegas. The over-under for the game is sitting at 48.5. Big thanks to Danny Kanell, and a big welcome to London Fletcher, helping us get you ready for Super Wildcard Weekend. And we're not done with them either. We have another Saturday game to discuss, another cold Saturday game to discuss, as it turns out. But first, Raiders go for their 3rd postseason win over the Bengals in history. They've never lost to them in an elimination game, and they've beaten them as the Oakland and LA Raiders. Now, can they do it as Vegas? Bengals are favored. Kickoff, 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.